Hello, this is Rose Cuison-Villazor, Interim Co-Dean of Rutgers Law School in Newark, and this is The Power of Attorney. This morning, I have the privilege of speaking with Jeanne LoCicero, who is the Legal Director of the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey, and she is also one of our distinguished alumni. In fact, just last November, the Rutgers University Alumni Association gave her the Fannie Bear Besser Award for Public Service. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But for now, Jeanne, thank you so much for making time for us this morning.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here with you today.
So I like to start off these discussions by asking the interviewee about their origin story. And so by that, I mean, I'd love for you to talk about your backstory, your what has motivated you, the work that you do. What are some aspects of your background that has led to where you are today?
Well, I think there are a lot of threads in that. And so I think I'll start with college. I went to Rutgers, Douglas College at Rutgers, New Brunswick. And there I really found myself amongst activists and organizers and became one, working initially on access to affordable education and really like fighting tuition hikes and trying to advocate at the legislature for more support for higher education and access to higher ed. And then within that, some of my friends had taken over a building as part of a protest, and they were being prosecuted by the university within the disciplinary system. And I went to some of those hearings, and that's where I first encountered Jeff Fogel, who's another alumni and one of the first lawyers I ever knew. And he was defending my friends and fellow activists. And it was a really kind of fascinating and interesting time to be an activist, but just watching him kind of step into this role. And so I became a big fan of his right away. And then as part of my activism, the university was moving to implement a new disciplinary policy that was going to be a lot harsher for students. And so continued working, and that became a lot more intersectional kind of across campus movements. And I also took a women in the law class. I was a women's studies major, and I found it really fascinating. And I asked went up to the professor. This is like before the, internet was what it was. We had just got an email. So I went up to the professor to ask, this is really interesting. What can I do? And she happened to be on the board of the ACLU of New Jersey. And so I was really fortunate enough to get a phone number and, had to actually call up and ask questions about an internship and was able to intern my junior year at the ACLU of New Jersey. And so those were a couple of the strands that led me to law school. I worked for 2 years after graduating, and and as part of that, I was a foster parent advocate. And one part of my job was to help support foster parents when they were in proceedings in front of what was then DIFAS, Child Welfare Agency. And I found myself really frustrated by the binders of regulations that we were kind of confronting, and really could start imagining myself being in a position to be challenging and changing the laws. So yeah, those are some of the threads that helped me decide to apply to go to law school.
Thank you. So I want to dig a little bit deeper. There are different themes that emerge just from what you're saying. You went to Douglas College, so that's the women's only college within Rutgers University. And so I'd like to ask you a little bit more about what was it like to go to a women's college within Rutgers University? Why did you choose to enroll in that program?
Well, I wasn't really. At the time, the university had, was more of a college-based system. And right now it's a Douglas Residential College, which is a different approach to how the university is organized. And I happen to be paying a little attention to it because my daughter is a senior in high school and looking at colleges right now.
Same here, actually.
Stressful.
Yeah. It's a lot of, so stressful, anxiety producing. April 1st is coming up, and that's a big day for many schools. Yeah, I'm with you. can feel. I'm here with you with respect to, and I want to offer you a hug, a virtual hug.
Yes.
It's stressful from
Thank
our
you.
perspective too. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. So part of what there were a lot of factors when I was looking at colleges, but I really liked the smaller community of Douglas and the kinds of supports it was providing to women. And I had a tremendous experience. And that's where, a lot of I found fellow activists and people who were really like imagining new worlds. And that was also what led me to the Women's Studies program, this interdisciplinary approach to thinking about problem solving and learning our history and with a lens, a gender-based lens. And so it was a really great time in my life. And I participated in student government, and I some of them, the closest people in my life are from my time at Douglas and Rutgers.
Did you grow up in New Jersey?
I did. I grew up in Monmouth County near Asbury Park. And so Rutgers, part of the angst about when I think about this, how I was making those calls was, only going 45 minutes away was a little bit of a thing for me. But it's one of those decisions where at the time I was a little angsty about it, but looking back, I just can't imagine a better experience.
Yeah. And so you said that there was, you were exposed to legal advocacy when some of your friends took over a building and they had to go through a hearing. Was that what sparked your interest in going to law school? Was that sort of the decision point to say, I'm going to go to law school?
That wasn't it exactly, but that was when I was like, wow, lawyers are cool or can be cool. Right? I didn't know any lawyers growing up and even when I went to law school, I didn't really have a sense of what the legal profession was like. I mean, I often joke that if I knew how much writing was involved in being a lawyer, I might not have gone. But I think meeting Jeff Fogel was just one of those things where he was doing civil rights work in a lot of different areas. And he was just really a fascinating person to kind of watch and learn from. And then, and like I said, I took this Women in the Law class and like thinking about, I remember we had this big like law school book called Women in the Law. I think that we were, reading cases from and writing up case briefs and talking about the evolution of how women have been treated in the courts. And I found it really cool. And so then maybe one of the markers was the ACLU of New Jersey internship when I was a junior, because at that time, part of what I was doing was analyzing proposed legislation. I might be overselling what I was actually doing as a 20-year-old, but I was reading bills and kind of trying to help summarize things. And then another thing I would help with were the letters they were receiving. We call it intake, asking for help from the ACLU. And that was really formative, reading some of the letters, especially from people who are incarcerated, thinking about the injustices all around us. And for me, another driving value has been like holding power accountable. And so, I really thought about lawyers as a mechanism for holding our government accountable and kind of keeping the government in check and not overstepping. And so that's, partly I learned from my internship at the ACLU of New Jersey.
It's interesting that now it's come full circle, right? Because now you're the legal director of the ACLU in New Jersey. And I definitely want to learn more about the work that you're doing there, but not yet. I want to go back still and ask you, so you spent 2 years after college, and then you were an advocate for foster parents. Then you decided to go to law school.
Right.
Tell us why you chose to come to Rutgers Law School.
Well, I was really committed to continuing my activism through my career, right? And so I was looking for public interest law schools, and it was just hard not to go to the People's Electric Law School, right? Rutgers had a tremendous reputation for that, and frankly, I was, putting myself through school, paying my own bills, and the idea of trying to pack up and move across the country or even just to Pennsylvania was really daunting. And so it was kind of the combination of why would I leave my own backyard when this tremendous resource is here? And another formative experience for me as an undergraduate activist was working with law students. It was a cross-campus activism emerged because of some racist remarks that a former Rutgers University president made. And this was, I think, 1994 or 95. The then president there was a recording of him referring to Black students being genetically inferior related to their lower SAT scores. And the students were absolutely outraged. And like I said, we'd been doing some intersectional organizing. We didn't call it back then, but across campus movements, and so as part of organizing to protest and get the president fired, I'd come across law students in that, and so I was really impressed with the Rutgers law students. And I'll just tell you, like, the short end of it is that the president didn't get fired. He stayed for many years after that, but there was a real sense of anger and outrage about these comments and about, that he could just stay in this role in spite of, obvious bias against Black and brown students. So anyway, that was another formative experience, but just a great opportunity to meet students from across the campuses, including here at the Newark campus.
I didn't know about that incident. It's hard to. I'm so grateful that our President Holloway, is the president. I'm a big believer. I'm a big fan of his and the beloved community approach. But just in thinking about President Holloway as who he represents, from my perspective, I believe in the mission that he has said, and I cannot imagine having a president say racist remarks like that. Particularly even back in 1995. That was in the 90s for him to say that. That president to say that is just, it's disappointing and enraging. And I'm glad that you and Rutgers law students were part of this pushback. It's unfortunate that he continued to stay within the presidency. But yeah, you're right. The Rutgers Law School, as you know, has this, the Newark location has this moniker of being called the People's Electric Law School, which stems from the 1970s and the type of activism that students, particularly Black law students at the time, but also other students of color who kept pushing for change, and faculty pushing for change in the law school and in terms of who can become a lawyer in New Jersey. And so I'm proud of Rutgers Law School and the role that we played through in the institution, especially the minority student program, in helping to creating pathways for first gen, for students of color, for Black students in particular, to become lawyers in New Jersey. And that is who we are. And we're very proud of that. And it makes it consistent with you as the kind of student that you and lawyer that you are now, but also the student that you were at the time when you were in undergraduate and then coming to law school.
Yeah. And I have to say, I'm so grateful for the law school's commitment to that kind of diversity in the profession, because it made my academic experience so much richer, being around people from across, experiences. I was going to say the state, but across the state, so many different folks we could learn from we could learn from in the classroom. And that was really important to my experience. And even thinking about, taking classes with evening students. And, there were a lot of us who'd worked for many years before coming to law. I was 2 years, but there were, I had people in my class who'd been, nurses and doctors and other types of folks who were, coming off of these careers and could add so much to our conversations about the real world impacts of the law.
Yeah, I teach. I've taught some classes in the evening, and I have always been impressed with the part-time students. I have this one physician in one of my seminars a year ago, and And I don't know how part-time students did it. And so I echo what you're saying about the diversity of the student body, including in the part-time program. Many of those students are caretakers, full-time caretakers, also work full-time during the day. Okay, so what can you tell us when you started law school?
I graduated in 2000. So if I'm doing my math right, that would have been.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yes, when we honored you in November, I think we were talking about we both graduated law school at the same time. I went to a different law school, but yes, so 2000. Got it. Okay.
Right, so that would have been September of 97, I guess, or August of 97. Yeah.
Do you remember back then when so it was Y2K, right? That was one of the social issues of the time. What's going to happen in the year 2000? And I don't know if I remember in law school, we're all thinking that are computers really going to crash?
Yeah, actually, for a couple of months right before law school, I had a part-time job helping a tech recruiter, which I didn't even know existed, but like I was helping with resumes and stuff. And the big push then was hiring engineers to make sure that all the computers didn't crash in 2000. So yeah, it was a big deal.
It was a big deal. Nothing happened, New Year's Eve, it's like, oh, the world continued. Computers didn't crash. Great. So, tell me about what it was like in your first year of law school. And so you had taken 2 years off between college and law school, and so now you're back in the classroom. What was that like for you?
Well, it was such a privilege. I was, after graduating, I was just tired, from undergrad, and thought I can't really do more schooling. And then after working and paying your bills and trying to, just live your life, the idea of coming to a classroom to just think your thoughts and learn from other people was really exhilarating. And I experienced classrooms in a way I really don't think I appreciated as an undergraduate. And so yeah, it was really exciting to be able to just, I considered, law school my full-time job. And so I would, go to the library and, I had a study group my first year, and it was just, and then I started getting involved in the student organizations on campus, like the LGBT caucus and the Women's Law Forum. And I'm not sure if they still exist in whatever forms they exist now. Great. Yeah. And so it was just a fun and exciting time. I liked my property class. I had Professor Pope. And it was tremendous. And, all of those first year classes, I just, it was hard, don't get me wrong, but I just really found law school to be a real joy.
Okay. So I'm glad one of the questions I normally ask is, okay, what was your favorite class? And I teach property law. And so I think property law is the best subject in the first year curriculum. But I know many law students disagree with me because of rules like the rule against perpetuities and all that.
I mean, there are all those technical pieces, but I think, the idea of thinking broadly about what it means to own things and all of the kind of systems in place to regulate that, it's really fascinating. So,
yeah. Well, what was, if you can, if you feel comfortable sharing this, what was the class that you felt impacted you the most when you were in law school? Was there such a class?
So hard. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, shout out to the clinics, right? Because I think, practically speaking, they really help you with, the rubber hitting the road. But I'll tell you, one of the classes that I'm really grateful I took was federal courts or federal jurisprudence. I'm not sure what it, if I'm remembering the name of the course right, but that really helped me think about, as somebody who wanted to be a litigator, that really helped me understand civil procedure in a new way, and courts and what their role is and what it isn't, and the kind of the barriers and I'm using my hands here, but just the restraints, I guess, on access to the courts and all of the kind of hurdles that litigants have to go through to try to vindicate their rights.
Yeah, it's we still offer that class, and it's a popular class. It's an important class, right. As you're saying, particularly if you want to practice, if you do want to litigate in court, and especially in federal courts, of course. What clinic did you do?
So I did clinics for 2 years. And my second year, I did the constitutional rights clinic. And then my third year, I did the women and AIDS clinic.
Oh, I see. Okay. Um, we don't have the women and AIDS clinic anymore,
Right.
unfortunately, but we do have those some of those cases have been subsumed in the other clinics that we have. And I don't know if you and I have had this conversation before, but we are going to be reviving the women's rights law clinic. And
Oh,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
exciting.
and it will be named after Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The family gave us permission to
How
use her name.
tremendous.
Yeah, yeah. So we're so excited about that because, especially in, like, and I'm sure you'll be talking about this later with the what is happening with respect to reproductive justice and women's rights. And so here at Rutgers, we want to make sure that we offer our students an opportunity to engage in that kind of work. Okay, so
That's very exciting to hear.
yes, we're fundraising for that, and we're really excited about that about the Women's Rights Law Clinic coming back. So let's talk a little bit about what you did after law school. What was your first job after law school?
So my first job was a fellowship with the ACLU of Alabama, and so I went to Alabama for a year, and that I absolutely credit the law school clinics for helping prepare me for that, and for them being willing to hire me as a law fellow. And so I was based in Montgomery, Alabama, and at the time, the ACLU of Alabama didn't have any full-time attorneys, so it was particularly challenging to kind of go to this new place. And I fortunately was able to find a terrific board member as a mentor, but it's a place in a lot of need for civil rights lawyers, and so in the intervening years, all of the ACLU affiliates now have permanent legal staff and have really grown. And so it's been fun to watch the evolution of that as well.
Have you lived in Alabama before that?
I had not. So I'd never left New Jersey before that. And so part of my thinking was like, I need to try somewhere new. And in candor, I had a job offer with a large law firm. And so I knew I would be coming back to that as my second job. So that gave me a little bit of security to kind of take a risk and try something in a new place.
I jumped ahead. I actually wanted to highlight that you graduated with highest honors in law school, which is, that's such an amazing, an impressive feat. And so I'm glad that I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that about you, including the public interest work that you were doing. You were also quite successful in law school. And so I'd love to just hear a little bit about what you, as advice to some of our students who are listening, what did you do in law school to help you balance the work, the social justice work that you were doing at the time in the clinics and then classes? How did you balance all of that together?
I don't know if I actually remember, but
it's not that long ago. We didn't.
No, it's not. It's not. I will say that I had a great support system at home. I had my roommate was also one of my best friends, and she helped keep me grounded through most of law school. And so I will say that I think it gets easier, especially for first year students. Let me tell you, it gets easier when you're a second and third year student to kind of have a little more sense of where to spend your time and how much time to spend on studying and different tasks related to your schoolwork. I feel like your first year, you have no sense of should I be spending 8 hours on this or 2 hours on that? You just, because of the way law school is structured with one exam being your whole grade, it was really hard, I think, to figure out those, how to invest your time. And so I had, I think especially second and third year, when you want to be involved in public, and, when I went to school to do public interest work, I wanted to make sure I was getting the full range of experience. And so I was, you just kind of try to carve up your weeks and your days, I guess, to do that. I will say that one thing I did my third year was, in addition to the clinic, I was working for Jeff Fogel, who I mentioned earlier, hired me as a legal assistant, part-time, very part-time work. And he was doing some shopping while Black cases, and this is like 20 plus years ago, these, people who'd been racially profiled while shopping and kind of moved into the criminal justice system. And so I was working with him on these cases. And one thing I would just encourage people to do is like look for the lawyers, especially smaller firms, right, that are doing the kind of work you want to engage in, because maybe you can, get 10 hours a week working with them to just learn the nuts and bolts of that. So yeah, I don't know if that's a particularly clear-cut answer, but, there were just so many opportunities. And I think that's one of the hard thing for law students is like figuring out where to spend your time. And so I'm not sure I have much guidance on that in particular.
Yeah, no, your answer is great. It's I think many students need to figure out how to which areas of law they're interested in and how to spend their time, who to be with to get that kind of support system, and make sure that they are true to their passion, but also be open to other possibilities. So it's hard. It's not easy for law students to navigate all of that. And so I think what you said is helpful. So then after your fellowship with the ACLU in Alabama, you then went into private practice. What kind of work did you do?
So I was on the litigation in the litigation department, and I did a range of work: bankruptcy litigation, white collar defense, some investigations, and contract disputes. So it was a wide range, and it was a really fabulous experience because, there were just so many opportunities to learn and to be trained, and by some leading lawyers in the field, and then also to know what it like when it feels like unlimited resources. Obviously there are limits, but just like when you have the resources to really chase down every angle to defend, on a client's behalf, I think that helped me understand what was possible. And then of course, to scale it in my current role.
Yeah.
And then,
okay.
And then there, another thing that was important for me was finding pro bono opportunities in particular. And so I had several pro bono matters, and a couple in particular were representing asylum seekers, and those were really meaningful, in particular because of the close client contact I had an opportunity to have, and so I just would encourage people in whatever law practice they have to really think about pro bono opportunities. And so that law firm was Debevoise and Plimpton.
Okay.
And so I had done OCI on campus and worked for them my second year summer, and then took the job after my fellowship.
Got it. Debevoise is still one of our big supporters of the law school. Several of our students end up going there after law school. And so it's great that you got that training there and the opportunity to still do pro bono work. And so at some point you had interned before for the ACLU New Jersey, and then you wound yourself back at the ACLU. Can you tell us about that process? What was that? How did you get back to the ACLU?
So when I was an intern, there were 4 people on staff, and so it was a very small shop, and I had really, like I said, it was a very formative time for me, and I became a big fan of constitutional law, both from that experience and from my clinical experience, and so I was working at Debevoise, and like I said, having a really fabulous experience there. But I always knew I would want to return to public interest work. And so I saw that a staff attorney job opened up, and I knew how rare they were. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity to return to the ACLU of New Jersey.
What kind of cases did you work on as a staff attorney?
Well, a whole range of things. Early on, I was working on a case of discrimination against a mom who had HIV. I was working on jail conditions cases. Marriage equality was did not exist when I started at the ACLU of New Jersey, and so there was a lot going on related to marriage equality, students' rights, voting rights, other like broader anti-discrimination work. One thing I can tell you, though, is early on in my tenure at the ACLU of New Jersey, I was a staff attorney, but then I also became a client, which is to say that when my daughter was born, I was looking, so my wife and I couldn't get married at the time. And well, we actually had been married. I should back up and say we had eloped to Canada because Canada was marrying couples. But our marriage wasn't recognized. And so when we came back to New Jersey and she was pregnant, and I asked my boss, Ed, like, hey, I need someone to help us make everything legal. I have to, make sure that I'm a legally recognized parent to my daughter. Do you know anyone? And there was an attorney who'd been volunteering with the ACLU in the past who he recommended, Bill Singer. And Bill said, sure, I could, do all of this work, but I have this theory that I really would like to try out in a family court. Are you game? And so it ended up becoming an ACLU case where we applied to the family court. Instead of me being required to adopt my daughter, we asked for the court to apply the presumption of parentage, that it would similarly be applied to a husband whose wife had been artificially inseminated. And so anyway, that was a very formative experience for me because as a client, I just realized how very vulnerable people are to sharing their stories and having all of this information out about you in the courts and in the public. And so we were successful. It was great. And our case ended up being published and it has been cited in various courts and law review articles. But we shared a lot about our experience and our relationship, and it's all in this decision that's now published and out in the world. And it just makes me really cautious and sensitive to people in the trust they're offering us, or the trust we're building together to in service of trying to have an impact on and advance the law and on civil rights.
It was really brave of you and your wife to agree to be the face of that issue, right? And there's always vulnerability when one goes to chooses to be a plaintiff or to be the face of a particular cause. And I imagine now as you're wearing your attorney hat at the time, staff attorney hat, and now as legal director, it's helpful that you have that experience as a client. Particularly because it's the ACLU of New Jersey. It is the leading organization pushing for equality, civil liberties. And so I appreciate the bravery that you and your wife and your family took it on. Because it's not easy to be in the public limelight like that. And yes, everything is Googleable these days. So it's all
forever,
out there.
Right?
Forever, right. Forever to be read. It's in posterity. And so, so I'd like to, what was it now going back to as a staff attorney and the work that you did before you became a legal director? What are some of the, in general, challenges the staff attorneys face? Perhaps maybe that would be the question. With you as a staff attorney, what did you think were some of the major challenges that you faced in the work that you did?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, so I was at the organization when it was a lot smaller. When I was a staff attorney, I was the second attorney on staff. And so I think part of what I would encourage people who are earlier in their careers is to really think about professional development. And what do they want to have experienced by year 5 in their careers, and like how to kind of build that out. So I would, so thinking about professional development, especially when you're at a smaller organization, is something I would encourage. But the challenges of doing this kind of work generally are that it's relentless. Like there's so much of it to do. And I've always said like the hardest part is how often we have to say no to people because we have to, be mindful of our own boundaries and bandwidth and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now as legal director, then how many staff attorneys report to you?
So in our legal team, we have 12 people. 9 of us are attorneys and 3 of us are administrative staff members. And so it's a bigger, the legal department is bigger than the organization I came to. And so there's just been tremendous growth. And I would say the growth has not just been in the numbers of people, but also how we do our work. So we take a really integrated approach to how we think about trying to solve problems and make New Jersey a fairer place. And so we have a policy team now and a communications team, and we're really trying to use all of the tools available to advance fairness and justice and equality across the state.
Are there? Can you talk about the key priorities of your office at this time?
Sure. So for a long time, the 2 big issues we work on are criminal legal system reform and immigrants' rights. But of course, increasingly, reproductive justice has become a bigger part of our work. We work on student and youth rights. The ACLU kind of covers a lot of ground. And so, we have our priority issues, and then we kind of jump in sometimes to defend or get involved in cases that, are emerging issues. And I would say that a lot of what we do is think about our work through a racial justice lens. Really, all of the issues we work on intersect with racial justice because we know that so much of New Jersey and our country's systems are just kind of like with racism kind of in the mix. And so we're always thinking about that angle as we approach our work.
And so forgive me, I wish I knew the answer to this, but what's the relationship between the ACLU of New Jersey and it's a national organization? How does, do you have to have permission from somebody else in order to pursue the cases that you want to pursue?
So no on the permission question. So every state has an ACLU affiliate, and we have our own board of directors, our own executive director, who kind of set our agenda and priorities. And then as legal director, I work with the executive director and the rest of our team to kind of, prioritize particular issue areas and work. So, but then we have this national ACLU, and we collaborate with them all of the time on legal matters, on legislation, on all kinds of things. They're a terrific resource because they have a lot of issue area expertise that we can tap into, and so we, they work across the country and kind of have this terrific national perch to like look at the impacts, widely. We will. I'll reach out when I have a question about, for example, a reproductive, rights bill that's coming up, and has that been considered elsewhere? And so we can kind of look to both our national colleagues and also colleagues in other states to kind of help understand the context or not reinvent the wheel or share out expertise. So it's a really terrific network of organizations to be a part of.
That's really useful, especially these days when collaborations are key, right, to advancing movements and pushing for substantive changes in criminal justice and in other areas of the law. If you're the legal director, you work with a bigger team than before. If you had a magic wand, you could be the ruler of the day. What would you do differently with respect to maybe let's start small, the organization? What would you do so that way you would be able to do better the kind of work that the organization wants to do?
Wow, that's a tough question. I think resources is always the issue. I'd love to have not my own, but I'd love for the organization to have, more folks who could drill down on, really focus on particular issues. And we have some of that. So we've recently hired a voting rights attorney, and we've just hired an attorney to focus on decarceration, and she'll be working on some clemency issues. And so we have an attorney focusing on technology and surveillance and algorithmic bias. So we have some of that, but as I get, I just mentioned 3 topics. I'd love to have more, right? So that's probably, building out particular expertise on the various civil rights issues that we work on would be a dream.
Yeah, and then having more resources. I after law school, after I clerked, I then worked for a nonprofit organization, a civil rights organization in New York City. And a lot of the work that the executive director and also the legal director had to do was to raise money just to make sure that we were able to do the work that we needed to do, and then some to pursue other projects. So I imagine it's the same type of situation with the ACLU of New Jersey.
It is, yes, for sure. But we have a lot of support, which is terrific. And when I think about more resources, it just means like we could do more.
I believe that the ACLU of New Jersey hires law school interns still. I mean, you were an intern before in college, but then do you also hire law school interns?
We do. Our internship program is really important to me. And so we have law students come over the summer. We also have a relationship with Rutgers where we have the Wank Fellowship. And so we have 2 law students interning with us right now. They're second years. And so we usually have 1 or 2 Wank Fellows every semester. And we also have, our undergraduate internship program's been on hiatus during the pandemic, but we're hoping to have that up and running later this year, hopefully for the fall semester, otherwise for sure in the spring of 24. But interns have always been a really important resource for us. First of all, they bring their tremendous experiences and ideas, and then they can help us have a bigger impact on our work. And so we have somebody now helping us do some research on a trans rights issue, or they might help us with a brief section or draft a letter. And so we have a queue of projects we want interns to help us with. So would definitely encourage students to think about interning with us. And we have a page on our website about that.
Fantastic. Well, we're near the top of the hour. And so I like to end these discussions since many of our listeners are law students or potential law students, I'd love to know whether you have any other advice for students who are particularly interested in working on issues that relate to the priorities of the ACLU of New Jersey. In law school, are there some classes that you think they should be taking, or other experiences that you think are helpful to the work that you do?
So in law school, I always suggest, and I didn't do this myself, but administrative law. You would not believe how often we are dealing with regulations, and that can really be some of the most burdensome things people experience when it comes to violations of their rights. And so the regulatory state, I think understanding that could be really useful. I also just want to put a pitch out that for folks who might not want to make a career out of public interest law, we still need pro bono attorneys in every part of the profession. And I'll just say, sometimes I need to lean on someone with property or, real estate law experience, or with experience in estates, or, there are all kinds of expertise you can develop and still be connecting with the public interest community and lending your resources to advancing public interest in the state.
Okay. Well, Jeanne, thank you so much for making time with us this morning. It was really fun and interesting to hear about the work that you did before you became a lawyer, and then while you're in law school, and then now as legal director of the ACLU of New Jersey. Thanks so much for making time for us today.
Thank you. It's been a real privilege and a fun hour. Thanks.
And actually, you're the last interviewee of this podcast. And so thanks so much for serving in that role. And to all listeners, thank you so much for joining us this season. We'll be back again in the fall, and we look forward to introducing other interesting alumni and lawyers and other advocates to all of you. Thanks again. The Power of Attorney is produced by Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations minutes from Philadelphia and New York City, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more by visiting law.rutgers.edu.